chance to play with some incredible people in the Android Netrunner, rest in peace, and Magic the Gathering communities. But it's time to clean off the rose-tinted glasses and use what I've learned from the other games to dive into competitive YuGiOh. Welcome to episode 2 of Diving into YuGiOh. This episode we've upgraded our lighting rigs so we don't need to use our monitors for lighting anymore, and we've also got another locals to work towards. For that locals, we're going to be adding a few more cards to our deck, and we're also going to be doing some test hands, including some disruptions from our imaginary opponent. So let's get straight to it. Okay, so we got some cards in from Northern Card Gaming, and that is our Liquid Soldier and our Honest News. Now, we need to make some room for that in our deck, so we're actually going to be taking out our Solid Soldier and Bubbleman that we added in the last episode. So our deck list is now exactly the same as it was in the picture in that episode. I still need to look at the hand traps because there's an Ash sitting in the sideboard that I really think should be main deck. I'm just not sure where it should go. I've seen some arguments for running 24 card decks instead of, not 24 card, 42 card decks instead of 40 card decks, but I don't know if I want to do that, so there's quite a few arguments around basically the amount of draws, like Garnet draws the deck draws. The argument against going to a higher deck size to counteract that is that all of those Garnets can be used to fuel Faris. So they're not actually dead draws, you'll still use them. And having a certain density of hero cards to discard to Faris is really important. So I'm not sure if we're going to go to 42 or if we're going to stay at 40 for now, but I think the most likely outcome is that we stay at 40. So we've finally got our deck up to full power, in quotes. We still don't have the Evil Hero package, which is something we're going to have to add. But for now, we have access to Liquid Soldier and Honest News, so Trinity OTKs are online. And with that, we now just need to basically get on with some test hands and start playing through imaginary disruption cases, because that's what took most of our time last locals, was just figuring out how to play through disruption. So if we can figure that out beforehand, we won't get caught with our pants down when it happens again. Okay, so I've done some research into what kind of cards people were running in their side decks before the ban list. There's not a huge amount of information available post ban list, and the format doesn't really seem to have been solved, so I can't make any judgment calls there just yet, but there's previous existing information. So first up is back row hate. People running Red Reboots and Cosmic Cyclones. We don't care about these at all. People aren't going to bring them in against us, and even if they hit a mass change with those, we can just chain it in response. So that's not really worth us caring about. Next up, these we really care about, but there's not much we can do about them. If we get Raigeki'd or Darkhold or Nibiru'd, we're just toast. Basically, the only way we can play through that is just by not overextending into the board, building a slightly weaker board initially, and I don't know if at that point we just lose because we built a weaker board and heroes aren't exactly the most resilient to getting stomped when it's not their turn. So basically our play around board wipes is go second, hope they don't Nibiru us, and kill them before they get a chance to cast Raigeki. Then we've got Kaijus, specifically Gameciel. Now, this is usually an out to stuff like Dragoon. I just don't see people bringing in Kaijus against us versus just bringing in board wipes on Nibirus, so I'm going to assume we're not going to get Kaiju'd. Next up, Lancia seems pretty common right now. This mostly hits decks that want to banish stuff. We don't do that much banishing. Not really a big deal to us. I don't think anyone's going to bring in Lancia against our deck, so I'm not going to prepare for that. And then we have Droll and Lockbird, and Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. These are incredibly painful cards. Well, Ash Blossom a little less so. I think the worst thing for us that can get hit by Ash is Vion. When increased special summons Vion from the deck, if you Ash that, you stop me searching a poly, you turn my Faris combo into a one-body end state instead of a two-body end state, which is really annoying. And yeah, that just denies me the most resources And the only way we really have to play around this is try and bait it with an E-Core or Stratos that we don't actually need. But if we need those to start off, then we might just break. So we're going to play some test hands with that, but I imagine it's going to be quite bricky. And it's probably going to be the same for draw. Now, draw at least lets us get the first search off, which means if we equal for a Stratos, we'll at least end with the Stratos in hand, but we won't then be able to use the Stratos to search for Ferris. So the big thing here is that draw stops just a lot of our deck. Yeah, the amount of damage this card does to us basically means our first, if we think we're going against it, our first search has to get something really good, and probably not a Stratos. Because if we just search for Stratos and they draw us, we just added a dead hero to our hand, which will probably end up either saving for the next turn or discarding to Ferris, which isn't ideal. So if we think we're playing against draw, don't search Stratos. Really hope you have a Ferris in hand. And yeah, the main thing is you get locked out of playing Poly quite a bit by discard, which means we're going to rely a lot more on Fusion Destiny, Links, and hopefully just having Ferris. So those are the test cases I'm going to play around. One where the first card gets ashed, because that allows us to test how we bait it out. And one where Ash gets saved for Vion, because I saw someone play like that and it was very effective. I was quite impressed. The person who did that was a previous hero player, so I'm assuming they knew how painful that was and decided to introduce me to that pain. And then finally, our first search getting drawn. So those three are our main test cases. I think those are the three ways we get hurt most by what we see in the current meta. Draw is mostly a side deck card, but I imagine it will be brought in against us along with board wipes. And Ash is a main deck card. So we're going to see a lot of Ash, and if people know to hit Vion, that's going to be incredibly painful for us. So we know what we need to play against now, so let's just set up some test hands and actually play through some of the stuff. Okay, we've got a locals tonight, and it's time to commit that cardinal sin of changing our deck last minute. And by last minute, I mean like an hour and a half before the event. So I made a mistake not having free Ash in the deck, so I'm putting free Ash in the deck. One of these was in the sideboard, but yeah, it should just have been main deck. Card hits way too many things. On the flip side, only one Called by the Grave to play against draw one Ashes just doesn't. You don't see it enough, and yeah, it's not worth the deck spot. The deck's really tight, and I'm about to make what I consider another sin coming from Magic. You really don't want to go over 60 cards in your deck. But I'm going to go to 42 here because I want to include some back row hate, and for that we're bringing in Cosmic Cyclones. With the 8 copies of Stratos in the deck, that going to 42 really isn't going to be a problem, and it will also decrease the frequency with which I see these 2 cards, because while Celestial and Dynatag are great cards, seeing them in your hand is disappointing. So the Vision Hero Garnets as well, having 42 cards in the deck means we'll see less of these in the hand. So yeah, I'm hoping by going to 42 cards we see a bit less Garnets, and our consistency isn't hit as much as it could be because we just have so many copies of Stratos in the deck, basically. So yeah, that's our build plan going forward, and if I see that I just end up like never ever struggling to get access to Stratos or Ferris, then I might cut an emergency call in favor of a 3rd Cosmic Cyclone, assuming I actually like it after tonight. I'm going to stick with 2 for now, because there are going to be some decks that don't play it, and if decks do play plenty of back row, well, we've still got Red Reboot and the other Cyclone in the side deck that we can go and get. And then, yeah. After these changes, we've brought 3 of our side deck cards to our main deck, so there are 3 deck spots available in our side deck. For that, we're going to be running 3 Ghost Spell, because there were quite a few graveyard-reliant decks last week, and while I don't know if I'm going to be facing any of those, having Bells to deal with them is going to be pretty reasonable. Lancia's great, but I think there are some Grave decks that would be better hit by Bell, and I basically want to experiment playing both of those against Grave decks. So, going to bring in some Bells, and then that's our list for tonight. So, let's go get prepped. All of our opponents today agreed to letting me record our games, so I'm going to be taking the opportunity to experiment with game recaps. Last episode I went mostly for end boards due to the time cost of animating the games, but here I'm going to test having longer recaps of the first round, then simplified recaps for the other 3 rounds. I'm expecting it to be a bit too long to do lots of detail for every single game, especially against decks similar to ours, so for now we'll just test 1 round and see how it turns out. On to the games! Our first opponent of the night was a fellow newcomer to the competitive side of YuGiOh and was on Salamangrates. This deck being one relatively easy to build from the structure decks I have meant it was a consideration for my first deck. Now we get to see how it plays and help us decide if we want to complete the deck ourselves. First game, we're going second, and our opponent opened with Flame Buffalo into Balinks, searching a Sanctuary and ditching a Spinny to draw 2. They then special summon Spinny to Balinks' Link Zone and link into Sunlight Wolf. They set 2 and pass to us. For our turn, we open up Stratos, which gets roared. We discarded the Malicious in our hand to special summon our Ferris. Our opponent chains Dimensional Barrier to this, calling Fusion. I had no idea this card existed, and I'm now cut off from most of my extra deck. However, I don't need to fuse to beat over 1800, so we continue with Ferris resolving, which grabs Increase. Increase tributes Ferris and special summons itself and Vion to the field. Vion bins Shadow Mist, triggering her effect, which gets Skullmeistered. Vion banishes Ferris to grab Polly from my deck for a later turn. Vion and Increase then link into Cross Crusader, who brings back Malicious just to tribute him for a Stratos for next turn. We then use Malicious to summon another Malicious from deck and link into Dread Decimator. We go to Battle Phase and swing into Sunlight Wolf, dropping our opponent to 6700. However, I didn't know about Balinks being able to protect Sunlight Wolf, so my opponent gets to keep it on the field. Removing Sunlight Wolf was basically our win con at this point, so now I feel like we're in trouble. We pass over to our opponent, who activates Sanctuary and reincarnates Sunlight Wolf to bring back a Roar from their graveyard to their hand. They then Paw of Desires to draw 2. They then summon Lady Debug, adding a Gazelle to hand. Sunlight Wolf triggers and adds Flame Buffalo from grave to hand. It's at this point that it twigs for me that Salamangrate is all about recurring their resources from the graveyard, so my game plan for going first should always be to just get to Darklaw. Our opponent then links into Transcode Talker using the effect to special summon Sunlight Wolf back. They then link both of these into Avramax, who attacks over Dread Decimator and drops us to 5000. Back to us, as we open with a Dark Ruler no more to disable Avramax's effect. In hindsight, I should have done this at the end of the main phase, but it doesn't matter this game. We then summon Stratos to search Ferris, and our opponent hits us with the draw. Luckily, we got our poly last turn, so we discard Shadow Mist to summon Faris and bring out Vion and increase, declining Vion's effect as we have no good targets left in the deck. We then Monster Reborn Dread Decimator and use him to swing into Avramax. No damage is dealt due to Dark Ruler no more, and our opponent shuffles Dread Decimator back into our extra deck. We link Stratos and Vion into Cross Crusader, reborning Malicious, which we then used with Cross Crusader to link into Dread Decimator again. We then Mask Change Increase into Dark Law and pass on to our opponent. Our opponent then starts off by summoning Flame Buffalo to go into Balinx, realizes that Dark Law prevents Gazelle's summon, and scoops the game. And on to game 2, where our opponent makes us go first. The one thing on my mind is to get to Dark Law. So we bend Dynatag to summon Faris and follow through to increase in Vion, binning Shadow Mist. I then misplay and use Shadow Mist to add Liquid Soldier to my hand, preventing me from later using the effect to add Mask Change to my hand. Vion banishes Faris to add Poly to the hand, and we link into Cross Crusader who summons Dynatag from the grave. At this point I realize my earlier misplay and desperately try to think of an alternative. Cross Crusader attributes Dynatag to add Honest Neos to my hand so they can at least survive a turn, and we pass with a face down. A far cry from the possible Dark Law, Absolute Zero and Wonder Driver board we could have had. Our opponent starts off their turn with a Jack Jaguar into Balinx, which special summons Gazelle. We Ash Gazelle's effect to stop the Spinny going to grave. They then use Salamangreat Circle to add Foul to hand. They then use Spinny to buff Gazelle's attack to 2000, which is going to be relevant later. They then use Jack Jaguar to shuffle Spinny into the deck to revive itself. This triggers Foul in hand to special summon itself. They then link into Update Jammer, and then into Transcode Talker, which revives Update Jammer, and finally into Avramax. Avramax attacks over Cross Crusader, who cannot be saved by Honest Neos due to Avramax's effect backfiring on us, I believe. I'm not entirely sure on that ruling. This then puts us to 5000, at which point I remember Gazelle was at 2000 because of Spinny, so that's game. This ended up being the round tied due to time. Both being relatively new, we took the time to explain our cards to each other, which was incredibly helpful. From my end, this game was quite a valuable learning experience as I got to understand how Salamangreat work and learn from my incredible Shadow Mist misplay. Hopefully next time we face each other, we can crown a victor. Our next round was against Gren Marju, so not exactly a great Dark Law matchup. Our opponent goes first and opens with Dimension Shifter, so for 2 turns we can't use our graveyard. They use Path of Desires, to which we chain Ash, and they end their turn with a Gizmek Orochi and a face down. We open with Dark Ruler No More to stop Gizmek popping anything on our turn, going into a Fusion Destiny which gets stopped by Dimensional Barrier, calling Fusion. We use Faris to go into Increase and Vion, planning to go into Cross Crusader and search Honest Neos to deal with Gizmek. However, with Dimension Shifter active, we can't revive a Destiny hero to tribute for the search, so we pass with our 2 Vision heroes and a set Mask Change. Our opponent activates a few pots, and we chain with Mask Change to go into Dark Law, which banishes the Necrophase they just added with their Pot of Duality. Gizmek pops Dark Law and attacks over Vion. They end their turn with a Backrow and a face-down monster. They have basically no resources left, so I go for an OTK using the Absolute Zero Acid combo to clear their entire board beforehand. Turns out Gizmek can only activate its pop effect on its controller's turn, so my Dark Ruler in the previous turn was pointless. Dystopia, Sunrise, Acid, and Cross Crusader all get in for game. Game 2, our opponent chooses to go first and ends their turn with an Eater of Millions and 3 face downs. We equal for Stratos, who gets negated by Solemn Judgment. Fusion Destiny gets stopped once again by Dimensional Barrier. This card has definitely made its existence known to me now. And we end our turn with a face down. Our opponent slaps us for 500 with the Eater and lays down another face down for their turn. We start off with Liquid Soldier, reviving Stratos, who adds Faris to our hand. Our opponent accidentally showed Super Poly, but in good faith we played it as if we didn't know about it. To this end, we discard Shadow Mist to use Faris to go into Increase and Vion, who then gets Super Polyed into a Starving Venom. We use Gamma Seal to be rid of Starving Venom and poly into Sunrise, who gets Solemn Striked. We use Fusion Destiny to go into Dangerous using Celestial and Dynatag. I'm pretty sure I was supposed to play Dystopia here, since I called Dangerous Dystopia, but onwards we go, using Malicious Engrave to get to Cross Crusader, who revives Dangerous, and tributes him to go and get Honest Neos, which we use to get over Gamma Seal. Back to our opponent, who plays some pots and ends with a face down after Eater of Millions eats Cross Crusader. On our turn, we play our draw face down and use Celestial to refuel. Drawing a Fusion Destiny we no longer have material for due to using 2 Destiny heroes to make Dangerous last turn. We play 2 Dark Rulers because the first one gets Solemn Judgmented, and we use Solid Soldier to attack over the Eater of Millions, and our opponent ends up scooping it up. So, we got a 2-0 round here, which kind of feels like the gods throwing me a bone, because there were a lot of opportunities for improvement that came from these games. I seemed to be nervous still and rushing my turns, leading to pretty poor decision making. I can't really slow down as we come close to time every round, but I really do need to calm down a bit, which will hopefully come as I get more comfortable playing games not face to face. Next up, we're against Virtual World, and I'm not going to pretend to have understood this deck nearly well enough to explain all my opponent's players. I ashed a few things, but the deck seems incredibly resilient, so the impact was next door noticeable. First game, our opponent cycles through a bunch of Virtual World monsters until they end with a board of Ultimaya Zulkin, Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, and Stardust Charge Warrior, along with a Chuche and a face down. We start our turn by Cosmic Cycloning the Chuche and E-calling for Stratos. We use Stratos to bait out Crystal Wing's negation with Mask Change. It prevents us searching, but we get to bring out Masked Hero Blast, who halves Crystal Wing's attack. We then use Blast to bounce our opponent's face down for 500 life points. We then use Fusion Destiny to add Cross Crusader and Dangerous to our board and go to battle phase, during which we forget to ask about any battle relevant effects and attack into Crystal Wing with Dangerous instead of Cross Crusader. This means we leave Ultimaya Zulkin on the field. We pass to our opponent, who builds up to a Cloud Castle. I didn't realize it had a level requirement, so for our turn, our goal is to get 9 different heroes in the grave and a Dread Decimator pointing to our blast to get over it. We achieve this, but I don't twig until it's too late that this now means everything I have can attack. And I had held off using a Poly and Liquid Soldier in my hand, which would have been game. But for now, our opponent lives at 300 points. Our opponent builds back up to a Shen Shen and a Gigi, using Gigi to get rid of Dread Decimator and swing into our board. And finally, they overlay into a Sacred Tree Beast after using Chuche in their grave to increase Gigi's level to 9. So, 1 monster negate on a 2600 body and 300 life points left. We drop a Liquid Soldier attempting to revive Shadow Mist, which baits the Tree Beast's negate. We chain a Mask Change that we drew for turn to go into an Acid, popping their back row to reduce the tree's attack by 300 and swing for exactly lethal. Game 2. We get made to go first and attempt to use Vion to go into Cross Crusader by banning Malicious. Malicious gets ashed, so we're ending with a face down Cosmic Cyclone. Our opponent plays Kowloon to play a Chuche from deck, which we use Cosmic Cyclone to remove later in the turn. I tried to get a bit smart with Lancia by not using it straight after the Cyclone, but that probably would have been the best line since we end up chaining it to a banish for cost, so that effect ends up going through. Our opponent builds their board a bit, but we end at time and lose the game because of our own Cyclone. Lesson learnt to keep an eye on the clock. Okay, that was just another round full of misplays. That first game was saved by a miraculous top deck, and we lost the second to a card we didn't need to play if we just kept an eye on the time. Instead of a 1-0-1 win, we get a 1-1 draw. Our final round is against Zombies, another deck I'd considered from my structure deck collection. First game, we win the roll and go second. Our opponent opens up with Zombie World, Jacobolin, and Solitaire. We ash the effect of the Solitaire, and they pass with a face down. We start with Equal for Stratos, we summon Solid Soldier using his effect to special summon Stratos, who ends up getting impermed. From here we build up to an end board of Dread Decimator, Escarado, Sunrise, and Dangerous for the OTK. Second game, we're made to go first, and we pass with 2 face down Cosmic Cyclones. Our hand was that bad. We eat through 2 of our opponent's zombie worlds while they build up to OTKS right back with Beldrock, Beals, and Jacobolin. Probably should have been less aggressive with those Cyclones. Final game, we're going second again. Our opponent builds to a board of Vampire Sucker, Zombie World, and a face down. So we cycle in the Face Down, which was a rivalry of Warlords. I'm a bit surprised that's still in the deck against all Warriors. And then we cycle in the Zombie World so that we can actually use Cross Crusader this game. We drop Stratos, searching for Shadow Mist, which we use to summon Ferris, and we go into an increase in Vion, baiting Malicious and grabbing Poly with Vion. We build up to an OTK board, and the rock comes crashing down. We're left with a token with 11.6k attack and 5.2k defense, and pass with a Face Down. Our opponent builds into a defense position Beals, which can't be destroyed by battle or card effects, but we're both out of resources at this point, so it's a stalemate for a few turns with nothing exciting happening, aside from Cosmic Cyclone hitting an impermanence. We finally get to use Solid Soldier and Fusion Destiny, binning Shadow Mist, using her effect to search for Plasma. This gets 3 bodies on the field, and we summon said Plasma. We equip the Beals and swing for 4900, and finally Mask Change into Darklaw to swing with another 4900 once we buff it with Honest News. This round felt like I was finally getting the deck. I knew what I needed at specific points and was finding ways to get to the things I needed. Both games 1 and 3 we managed to build OTK boards, and despite being the Beard, we managed to OTK on a later turn anyway. Okay, so we went 2-0-2, 2 wins, 2 losses, and placed 3rd, which I don't know if that counts as a top when it's an event of 10 players, but it was enough for extra prize support, so I'm going to take it. And that combined with the 7th place last week, which got us a back to dual field center, means that once that field center gets delivered to the store and all that shipped out to us, we can open all that up in an episode. And hopefully that comes by next episode, because I've got some plans regarding opening some product for next episode. But basically I just wanted to say that the deck really performed this week, and it feels kind of bad because it feels like I didn't. Like, the deck kept giving answers, the deck kept just saving our bacon constantly, and we just kept misplaying. And sure, that was because, nerves or whatever, but a lot of it was just inexperience. And the fact that the deck kept outing us was just like, the deck has the answers in it, and it's never the deck's fault that we don't have an answer. It's always on me, and that feels amazing because it's just like there's so much room to grow with this deck. And yeah, that's something that actually not that many other card games have really given to me in such a large capacity. Like, it really feels like that I've got so much to learn with just this one deck, and I'm gonna expand it to other decks because this deck is very OTK combo-y, it feels like, and there's other like more control, slower decks that I want to play because I feel like understanding both avenues of play is going to be really important to actually understanding the flow of a game right now. Right now, games kind of end in a few turns because I either wipe the floor with them or I get a rock dropped on me. And that's, I'm sure that's not every single deck's game plan. So, I basically just wanted to say that the deck is doing incredible even without the Evil Hero package, and I just gotta sharpen a bit up and eventually we'll be taking first place maybe. After all that, I just wanted to say that playing the game again this past couple weeks has been an absolute blast, and the main factor of that is the community that I've had a chance to play with. Everyone I've played against the past few weeks has been incredibly accommodating of my attempt to get back into the game, explaining rulings, timings, chains, how to declare chains, explaining what their decks do so I'm not lost, explaining what effects are relevant at what times so that I don't misplay just due to lack of information. And that's been really, really incredible. And yeah, it's not always just been me asking, it's been them specifically saying, okay, I'm playing this thing, it's gonna do this, do you want to respond? Like, really, like, giving me time to process things. And that's considering we're playing in a reduced time limit, like reduced round time limit event this week. The fact that people were still willing to do that was absolutely incredible. So I'm very grateful for the people I've had a chance to play against so far. They've made learning the game an incredibly enjoyable experience. And if they're any example for what the rest of the YuGiOh community is like, then yeah, I just can't wait to meet more people. So I'm just wanted to say that I'm incredibly thankful to the community I've had a chance to play with so far, and yeah, if this is what everyone's like, then this is going to be incredible.